If this feels calm to you, you didn't understand it yet. Because real understanding is not comfort. It is destabilizing. It forces you to notice what you've been avoiding inside yourself. You are not here you are here to see more clearly. And clarity is what finally lightens what has been heavy for too long. Most people are not broken. They are emotionally exhausted from pretending they are fine. And those who are called compassionate are often the most tired of all. Because they learn to carry the emotional weight of others before they learn to recognize their own. You learn to listen. You learn to understand. You learn to soften your reactions so no one would feel uncomfortable. And over time, that softness stopped being a choice. It became a posture, a reflex, a way of disappearing politely. You were praised for being kind. You were valued for being patient. You were seen as wise because you rarely confronted. And slowly, you began to confuse restraint with depth, silence with maturity, endurance with love. No one told you that compassion without discernment is not wit. It is self-erasure that learned how to sound noble. You did not become compassionate because you were strong. You became compassionate because it was safer being honest. Because being honest risked rejection. Because clarity risked conflict. Because naming what you felt risked being misunderstood. So you adapted. You learned to understand everyone before they had to understand you. You learned to forgive quickly so you wouldn't have to explain pain. You learned to carry emotional discomfort quietly so others could remain comfortable. This was not virtue. It was survival with good manners. You call it empathy, but much of it is avoidance. Avoidance of being seen as difficult. Avoidance of being labeled harsh. Avoidance of standing in a truth that might not be welcomed. You became emotionally intelligent at the cost of being emotionally honest. You read rooms quickly. You sense tension immediately. You know how to de-escalate. You know how to soften the atmosphere. But you do not know how to remain present when something inside you says, this is not right. Not because you are weak, but because you were trained to believe that wisdom means never disturbing anyone. And so you learned to disturb yourself instead. You learned to reinterpret your discomfort as patient. You learned to rename your boundaries as selfish. You learned to translate your clarity into silence. You became compassionate in the way people become quiet when they do not feel safe to speak. This is why compassion feels heavy, because it is not flowing, it is flowing from obligation. You are not kind because you are open. You are kind because you are afraid of closing. And there is a difference. Real compassion does not drain you. It clarifies you. It does not collapse your center. It strengthens. But what you practice is endurance dressed as generosity. It is emotional labor that never ends because it is not rooted in choice. You carry other people's emotions more easily than you carry your own. You understand others faster than you understand yourself. You explain pain before you feel it. You rationalize before you recognize. That is not wisdom. That is intelligence that learned to bypass its own heart. You confuse being gentle with being absent. You confuse being calm with being quiet. You confuse being loving with being available. And because you are praised for it, you never question. You do not feel respected. You feel useful. You do not feel met. You feel needed. You do not feel known. You feel appreciated. And appreciation is not the same as being seen. Your compassion became a way to stay included without being revealed. It became a way to remain acceptable without being true. It became a way to belong without being present. That is why it feels hollow. That is why it feels noble but lonely. That is why it feels generous but empty. You are not disconnected from others. You are disconnected from the part of you that knows when something is misaligned. You learned to care without discernment, and that made you emotionally responsible for everything except yourself. Discernment is not cruelty, it is orientation. It tells you where you end and where another begins. It tells you when compassion is honest and when it is a disguise. Without discernment, compassion becomes submission. It becomes agreement without presence. It becomes tolerance without truth. You forgive quickly because slowing down would force you. You accept easily because resisting would require clarity. You understand endlessly because understanding is safer understood. This is not maturity. It is emotional over-adaptation. You became wise in the eyes of others by becoming quiet, and that silence is what you feel as empty, not because you lack love, but because you have not allowed love to You give compassion outward because you learned that inward direction was dangerous, because it made others uncomfortable, because it asked for space, because it required presence. So you became generous without being grounded, kind without being supportive without being supported. That is not wisdom. That is survival that learned to sound enlightened, and it is exhausting. You do not need to become less compassionate. You need to become more discerning, not to judge, but to locate yourself again inside your own care. Because compassion that does not include you is not compassion. It is abandonment with good intention, and abandonment always feels heavy, no matter how softly it speaks. You are not wrong for feeling drained by kindness. You are not cold for wanting space. You are not selfish for wanting. These are signals of intelligence, not failure. Your pain is not a flaw in your character. It is a message from your structure. Your pain is not random. It has intelligence. It has structure, and it has been trying to speak through you. This pain did not appear because you failed. It appeared because you adapted. Your identity was not built from freedom. It was built from what was necessary, from what kept you accepted, from what kept you safe, from what kept relationships stable. You did not choose to become understanding. You became understanding because it worked. It reduced tension. It avoided conflict. It kept you included. It made you valuable in environments where clarity felt dangerous. So your nervous system learned a rule. Being perceptive is safer than being present. Being gentle is safer than being honest. Being agreeable is safer than being real. This is not weakness. This is intelligence responding to its environment. Your compassion was a strategy before it was a value. And because it worked, it stayed. You learned to read emotional weather. You learned to anticipate reaction. You learned to soften yourself before others could harden toward you. You learned to adjust before you were adjusted. That is not kindness. That is navigation. And navigation is necessary when the terrain is not safe. Your identity became organized around one question. How do I remain connected without becoming exposed? So you mastered empathy, because empathy allowed closeness without vulnerability. It allowed understanding without revelation. It allowed presence without risk. You could hold others without being held. You could witness pain without revealing your own. You could remain indispensable without becoming visible. That is not compassion. That is protection that learned emotional language. Most people think defenses are harsh. They imagine walls, distant, coldness. But your defense is warmth. Your defense is availability. Your defense is understanding. You do not push people, you absorb them. And absorption looks loving, but it is also a way to disappear. This is how emotional numbness forms, not from trauma alone, but from over-responsibility, from being the one who stabilizes, from being the one who listens, from being the one who does not need. You learn to minimize your own signals because others needed space to express theirs. And over time, your signals stopped feeling real. They became background noise. They became something you could override. That is how discernment dissolves. Not because you lack perception, but because you use perception outward and neglect it inward. You know how to understand behavior. You do not know how to honor reaction. You analyze before you feel. You contextualize before you register. You explain before you locate. This is emotional intelligence without embodiment. It keeps you calm. It keeps you composed. It keeps you respected, but it separates you from your own center. Your compassion became a tool for order, for harmony, for stability. But wisdom is not order. Wisdom is alignment. Alignment requires discernment. It requires recognizing what belongs to you and what does not. It requires noticing when care is authentic and when it is compensatory. You are not compassionate because you love more. You are compassionate because you learned earlier than most that love was conditional. So you learned to be what was needed. You learned to be adaptable. You learned to be emotionally fluent. And emotional fluency can become a cage when it is not grounded in self-trust. This is why shame appears, not because you are wrong, but because something in you knows you have been overfunctioned. Shame is not the signal of wrongdoing. It is the signal of misalignment. You feel it when you say yes without presence, when you agree without clarity, when you forgive without completion. Your body registers what your identity ignores, and it responds with fatigue, with dullness, with emotional flattening, not as punishment, but as protection. Numbness is not collapse, it is containment. It arises when expression has nowhere safe to go. Your compassion created connection, it did not create orientation. You could relate deeply without knowing where you were inside the ring. So you became open without being located, available without being anchored, present without being grounded. That is why compassion became heavy, because it was not supported by discernment. Discernment is not judgment, it is clarity of position. It says, this is me, this is not me, this is mine, this is not mine. Without it, compassion spreads everywhere, and what spreads everywhere eventually loses form. You began to confuse understanding with responsibility. You felt obligated to carry what you could perceive, and because you perceived deeply, you carried excessively. That is how exhaustion becomes spiritualized. That is how depletion becomes virtue. That is how self-erasure becomes morality. But morality that excludes the self is not moral. It is obedient. You were not taught to include yourself in your own empathy. You were taught to be the container. And containers eventually crack if they are never filled. Your pain exists because your identity was built for function, not for presence, for regulation, not for resonance, for stability, not for truth. And that identity worked. It kept relationships intact. It kept chaos. It kept you admired. But it cost you intimacy with yourself. This pain is not punishment, perception. It is awareness that began before you were ready to listen. It is the part of you that knows compassion must include discernment to become with. You do not need to change. You need to notice. Transformation is not force. It is not effort. It is not the act of becoming something else. It is the moment you stop leaving yourself out of your own awareness. You have spent years refining how you relate to others. Now the movement is quieter. It turns inward, not as self-focused, but as self-inclusion. Discernment begins when you pause before offering care and ask, without drama, without judgment, where am I in this? Not to withdraw, not to protect, not to control, but to locate. Location is power, not dominance, not assertion, presence. When you know where you stand, compassion no longer drains you. It organizes. You do not need to become less kind. You need to become more precise. Precision is what makes compassion clean. It removes confusion. It removes obligation. It removes the quiet resentment that forms when you give without being present. Awareness is not confrontation. It is orientation. It allows you to say yes without disappearing. It allows you to say no without violence. It allows you to remain open without dissolving. Most of your exhaustion does not come from caring. It comes from caring while absent from yourself. You learn to extend empathy outward. Now empathy must complete its circle and include you, not as priority, as present. There is no urgency, no requirement to correct your behavior, no pressure to establish boundaries. This is not a task. It is a shift in attention. Before responding, you feel. Before understanding, you notice. Before giving, you locate. That is discernment. It is not intellectual, it is sensory. It is the quiet recognition of alignment or misalignment inside your own body. You already know it. You just learn to ignore it. You feel it when your chest tightens, when your breath shortens, when your stomach contracts, when your energy pulls inward. Those are not weaknesses. They are orientation signals. They are how your system tells you, this requires presence. This requires honesty. This requires inclusion of self. Strength is not pushing past these signals. Strength is listening to them without panic. Healing is not speed. It is accurate. It is the slow rebuilding of trust between your perception and your action. You do not need to withdraw from it. You need to remain with yourself while you are with them. That is the difference between compassion and submission, between kindness and collapse, between care and disappearance. Discernment does not harden you. It stabilizes. It gives your compassion a center. It gives your empathy a spine. It gives your generosity a location. Without it, you scatter. With it, you remain. You will notice small shift. You pause longer before responding. You feel less pressure to it. You stop translating your discomfort into patience. Not because you are becoming cold, but because you are becoming honest. You will still understand others deeply, but you will no longer confuse understanding with agreement, or empathy, responsibility, or love with endurance. You will begin to feel a different kind of calm. Not the calm of suppression, the calm of alignment. This calm is quieter. It does not need to be praised. It does not perform. It holds. You will stop trying to be good and begin to be real. Not dramatically, not heroically, just consistently. And consistency is what returns dignity. Compassion with discernment is not loud. It is clean. It does not save. It relates. It does not sacrifice the self to protect others. It includes the self, so connection becomes mutual. This is not self-interest. It is self-respect. And self-respect is the foundation of wisdom. You are not required to resolve anything. You are only asked to notice when you disappear. And gently, without blame, return. Return to your body. Return to your breath. Return to the moment you feel misalignment. Return before you explain. Return before you justify. Return before you abandon. This is responsibility without pressure, presence without performance, power without force. You are not becoming stronger. You are becoming clearer. And clarity is what allows compassion to finally rest. You are not late. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are becoming conscious of yourself.